Hello, Year 9, and welcome to your second part to writing your live theatre evaluation. So I hope that you all did the previous task, which was to watch a YouTube video of Blood Brothers and to create a list of things that you liked about it and the things that you didn't like about it. Now, that may become useful this lesson, but I'm mainly going to start looking at your lists for the next lesson on from this. So what is a live theatre evaluation? So on the GCSE course, you will go and see a play in a theatre, hopefully, if they're open by then. And in your exam in section B, you have a 30-mark question, which is you writing an evaluation based on that performance that you have seen. So over the next couple of lessons, we are going to prepare writing an evaluation. Today, we're going to start off by writing some live theatre notes. So your learning objective today is to learn how to prepare detailed live theatre notes for examination. By the end of this lesson, you should understand various production elements within Blood Brothers, be able to prepare detailed notes about a live theatre production, and use drama terminology accurately when describing the live production. So the very first part on your live theatre notes is to understand some of the basics surrounding it. Now, if we were doing this in the actual school and we were talking about this through lessons, we would probably spend about 4 weeks preparing our live theatre notes. Now, I'm not going to give you 4 lessons based on just preparing these notes. So there are some parts that I'm going to skip over, and I'm going to leave those parts out, mainly for time reasons. But here are some of the basics that you need to know about this production. The title of the production is Blood Brothers. The style is non-naturalistic with elements of naturalism. Now, remember, non-naturalistic performances, things happen that are not natural. For example, we could use mime, we could use breaking the fourth wall, we could use flashbacks, which mean going back to an earlier point in time, or a flash forward, as we see at the very beginning of Blood Brothers. The genre of Blood Brothers is tragedy, and tragedy provokes strong audience emotions, especially at the end where we see both Mickey and Edward end up in quite an unfortunate situation. The form is a musical. So when we have a form, we can either have a play, we could have a musical, we could have a monologue or a duologue. A play is strictly that. It is a play from beginning to end. No singing, no dancing. A monologue is one person reading prose, often by themselves on stage. A duologue is very similar. It means two people on the stage having a duologue, a conversation between them both. And a musical includes the singing and dancing throughout the performance. The structure is a cylindrical. It means that it's in a circle, so it starts and ends at the same point within the narrative. Okay. The intended effects then is to create a sense of catharsis amongst the audience. When I talk about catharsis, it means that it's a sad emotion, quite a strong, powerful emotion at the end of the play. The second is to create comedy and moments of laughter. Although this play is a tragedy, actually there are some quite funny moments in it. For example, when Mickey is telling Edward about the F word and they're laughing about it on stage. Those moments of intermittent comedy are important to have within this play. The aim, so when Willy Russell was writing the play Blood Brothers, there was a lot of social class divide within Liverpool, which is where it was set, between the 1960s to 1980s, and Willy Russell wrote Blood Brothers at the end of the 1980s. And the main message was to bring about social change within the world. He wanted to talk about Mrs. Johnson and her family and that idea of social deprivation. And then we've got the Loinses, who are actually very affluent, very well off. and the staging form is a proscenium arch. Some of that we are going to be coming back to in a couple of lessons' time. Now, on the right-hand side, you will see that there are some empty boxes. Your very first task then is to go back, and you now need to fill in the empty blanks with brief descriptions of how it's seen within the play. So, for example, I've spoken about the genre being a tragedy, and I've just given myself a few notes that tragedy provokes strong emotions, especially at the end. That's my little note, especially at the end. If it's the non-naturalistic, I just want 1 or 2 notes of how we see non-naturalistic elements within the play. Singing and dancing is a non-naturalistic element. You don't go into Costa Coffee, start singing and dancing. The only one I don't want you to talk about is the staging form, because we're going to come back to that in a couple of weeks. Don't spend too long on this, it is just meant to be in note form. So the very first part of your learning objective is to understand various production elements within Blood Brothers. So when we talk about production elements, this is everything that it takes to be put on the stage. So that is lighting. We need lights to be able to see what's happening. Acting, that's both physical and vocal. The set is everything that is on the stage. That includes furniture, props, and if you can see in the set in the YouTube clip, they've got quite a lot of scaffolding around, which makes up those houses. Costumes and sound. Now, sound does include music for the singing and sound effects. All of those make up the production elements within Blood Brothers. As I said, I was going to give you a slightly smaller version because I don't want to spend too long on it. We are only going to speak about 2 production elements. One is acting, which I'm going to cover today, and the second is lighting, which I'm going to cover next lesson. You are only asked to focus on those 2 production elements. Before I continue then to the next part, you will need this sheet. This is in the files, it's called the big sheet. On there is every keyword that you will need at GCSE Drama. You will also need this, which is the Drama and Theatre Studies adjective bank. So that gives you some adjectives to use with those keywords. So how do you use these 2 sheets? Well, you need to take 1 word from the big sheet. So for example, I've taken a vocal word, which is tone. Then you need to take 1 word from the adjective bank, which I've taken harsh. Both of these together would be a harsh tone of voice. It gives me a really good way to be able to talk about voice. So if you're thinking about something in Blood Brothers and you're not too sure how to describe it, look at the adjective bank, look at the big sheet word and join them together to give you the correct terminology that you are going to need. So we're going to start preparing our live theatre notes by looking at our first moment. Those second 2 parts of the learning objective, which is to be able to prepare detailed notes about a live theatre production and to use drama terminology accurately when describing a live production. So if you have the live theatre notes sheet in front of you, you will see that you have my notes for moment 1 and moment 2. However, I might be, as we discuss this, saying things that I've not necessarily written on those sheets. So we're going to watch the very first moment together. I've chosen 3 moments in which we are only going to talk about the acting skills, which are physical skills and vocal skills. You can see to the right of the screen, I've put all the keywords there, which we are going to discuss those keywords in a moment. So the very first moment is just after the opening moments in the first scene between Miss Johnson and Miss Lyons. Miss Johnson is cleaning Miss Lyons' house when they come to an agreement over what should happen with Miss Johnson's twins. So we're going to watch this moment and then we're going to talk about it.
And we'll go dancing and da, 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 da. Hello, Miss
Mrs. J. How are you? Is the job working out all right for you?
Ah, it's great, thanks. It's such a lovely house. It's a pleasure to clean it.
Yes, it is a lovely house, isn't it? It's a pity it's so big, though. I'm finding it rather large at present.
Yeah, with Mr. Lyons being away and that. When does he come back, Mr. Lyons?
Oh, let's see. Well, the company sent him out for, it seems like, such a long time. They sent him out for 9 months, so he'll be back in 5 months' time.
Oh, you'll be glad when he's back, won't you? The house won't feel so empty then, will it?
Oh, well, actually, Mrs. J, we bought such a large house for the children. We thought children would come along.
Oh, but, you might still be able to...
No, it's just that, well, we've been trying for such a long time, and I wanted to adopt from Mr. Lyons. He said he wanted his own son, not somebody else's. Myself, I believe an adopted child can become one's own.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, though, isn't it? Here's you, can't have kids, and me, I just can't stop having them. My husband used to say that all we had to do was shake hands and I'd be in the club. He must have shook hands with me before he left. I'm having another one, you know.
Oh, I see.
Oh, no. But look, it'll be fine, Miss Lyons. See, having babies is like clockwork to me. I'm back and on my feet. I'm working the next day, you know. And if I have this one on the weekends, I won't even have to take one day off. I love this job, you know. We can just manage to get by now. Ah! What are you trying to do, Paul? The shoes on the table! You're not put shoes on the table! Take them off! Miss Lyons, you don't put your shoes on the table. You never know what will happen.
Oh, I see. You're superstitious.
No, you don't put new shoes on the table.
Look, go on with you. If it'll make you feel any better, I'll put them away.
There's shoes upon the table, and a joker in the pack. The salt's been spilled and a looking glass cracked. There's one lone magpie overhead.
I'm not superstitious.
The mother said.
I'm not superstitious.
The mother said. Hello.
Well, what are you doing here? The milk bill's not due till Thursday.
Actually, I've given up the milk round and gone into medicine. I'm your gynecologist. Okay, Mummy, let's have a little listen to the baby's ticker, shall we?
So that's the first moments that we are going to be looking at now. So we're going to talk about the physical acting skills first of all. So we have posture, gesture, facial expression, tension, eye contact, proxemics, physical mannerism, pace and gait. Many of these words we've been using since you started drama in year 7. So posture is about how upright you are. So if you have an upright posture, your back could be nice and straight, whereas if you had a bent over posture, your back would be sort of hunched over. Gesture is anything we do with our hands. Facial expressions is anything we do with our face. Tension. So for example, if I walked and I was waving my arms about like it was a nice hot sunny day, we could say that I had little tension with my body. If I had my arms all the way down to the side of my legs and I was holding them tight against myself and I was walking down the road almost like a plank of wood, I could say that I had high levels of tension. Eye contact is quite self-explanatory. It's about the eye contact of the characters on stage with one another, but also remember this is a non-naturalistic performance where they need to build a relationship with the audience. So eye contact is also about the characters' eye contact with the audience. Proxemics. Now, we've spoken a little bit about proxemics over the last couple of years, but proxemics is the distance between actors on stage that shows their relationship. So, for example, in this moment, we can see the proxemics between Mrs. Loynes, who is on the left-hand side of the screen, and Mrs. Johnson is quite wide. This is telling us about their relationship. They're not necessarily friends, they're certainly not lovers, they probably are merely acquaintances. But as I'm going to talk about in a minute, as I analyse this, we can definitely see a status difference between these two characters. The next part of the proxemics is a little bit later on in the moment when they both discuss about Mrs. Loynes trying to have Mrs. Johnson's baby, and we can see the proxemics are a little bit more close as they're getting now a little bit more friendly with one another. And then again, when Mrs. Johnson finally agrees that she can have the baby, Mrs. Loynes gives her a massive hug, and we can see the proxemics shows that relationship has developed in some way. In this particular image, we can see facial expressions and the arms of Mrs. Johnson on the right-hand side give us a little bit more information about that new relationship that has developed. We're going to talk about that in a moment. So, talking about moment 1, some of the notes. So, as I've already said, you could write pages and pages and pages about a 2-minute clip, but there really is no point. So you must be really quite concise and accurate with the parts that you are talking about and the parts within the moment that you choose. Also, some of it overlaps and there is some repeating as we go on. So the very first point in this moment then, so the opening point of the moment, Mrs. Johnson is bending over the coffee table, placing a tablecloth on it. We could say that she's bending over with a hunched over posture while scrubbing Mrs. Loynes' furniture. Mrs. Loynes enters with a tall, upright posture, showing confidence and a higher status. She walks across the room at a fast pace with a large gait, again conveying an air of power and professionalism. So in this part, we see this very, very clear contrast between Mrs. Loynes and Mrs. Johnson within their acting skills, within that literally 10-second part. As Mrs. Loynes puts a pair of shoes on the coffee table, we see a slight change in status. When Mrs. Johnson warns her about putting shoes upon the table, she uses a hand gesture to show her fear and anxiety with the situation. She puts her hands over her face with her fingers widely spread apart, almost gripping at her face with high levels of tension. This is showing one of the main themes of superstition within the play. The two characters use a large proxemics to communicate their relationship to the audience. At the beginning, the relationship being the employer and the employee. This gradually changes as we see the two women coming up with a plan for Mrs. Loynes to have one of Miss Johnson's babies. The proxemics between the two characters gradually gets smaller as the relationship changes to a point where Mrs. Loynes hugs Miss Johnson with a tight grip. Miss Johnson shows the look of confusion on her face with a frown on her forehead and allowing her jaw to drop so her mouth is open wide dramatically. Miss Johnson is resistant to hug Miss Loynes back as this would be improper. So that's some of my notes in this very first moment of the physical acting skills. If you're ever unsure about whether you've put in enough information or not, you need to be able to go back to that a few days later and almost stand up and act it out yourself. If you think you could act it out and you've put enough description in there, then you've got it. If you haven't, maybe you need to think about how you could describe it a little bit more effectively. So the same moment, but this time we're talking about vocal skills. Now, I've only spoken about a small number of things within the vocal skills for this particular moment. So there's many words that hopefully you already know: pitch, pace, pause, tone, and volume. Pitch is how high or how low your voice is. Pace, either you can talk really, really fast like this, or you can talk really, really slow. Pitch, pace. Pause is when you include a pause, possibly for dramatic purposes. Pitch, pace, pause, tone. Now you can either talk in a really, really angry and aggressive tone, or you could talk in a really, really happy tone of voice. Okay, pitch, pace, pause, tone, and volume. Either you have a really, really loud volume, or you're really, really quiet. There's some other words on here that I didn't necessarily talk about there. One of them was emphasis. Do you emphasize certain words? For example, no, don't do that. I emphasize no. Accent. Where are you from geographically? Are you from Liverpool? Are you from Birmingham? Do you have a southern accent? And vocal mannerisms. So very much like physical mannerism, vocal mannerism is a habit. I'm quite bad at saying okay. I'm always in class going right, okay, okay. That's a vocal mannerism. A tut, that's a vocal mannerism. So our vocal notes then for moment one. So Miss Johnson speaks with a very strong Liverpudlian accent, often talking at a fast pace. Again, this accent is helping to show the status of Miss Johnson to the audience, as it was thought in the 1960s that people with an accent or a Liverpudlian accent were of a lower class. Shoes upon the table. Miss Johnson shrieks in a high-pitched voice as she tells Miss Loynes not to put those shoes upon the table. That shrieking shows her shock and anxiety again of that situation. Miss Loynes speaks with an RP accent. Now this is a regional pronunciation which is showing her education possibly and her status. She doesn't sound the same as Miss Johnson. She doesn't sound like she's from Liverpool. She doesn't have this Liverpudlian accent. She often speaks at a very nice, steady pace with a posh tone of voice as she's speaking to Miss Johnson. We could say again that it's helping with that status, the other way around this time, that sort of upper class, that affluency that we're getting from Miss Loynes within that moment. So hopefully you've managed to take some of your own notes from moment one as well. I am going through it quite fast, so if you feel the need to pause and go back a little bit, that's absolutely fine. So moment two then, I've chosen a moment where we see Mickey and Edward now, and they've grown up a little bit to the moment where they're both 7, nearly 8. So the first meeting of Mickey and Edward when they learn that they were born on the very same day was July the 18th and decide to become blood brothers. Also, this is Sammy's first entrance. So we're going to watch the moment together, then we'll talk about it.
I sometimes hate that Sammy. He rode me toy car, you know. Now the wheels are missing and the hubs broke off and the bleeding thing won't go. And he said when he took it, it was just like that, but it wasn't. It went dead straight. But you can't say nothing when they think you're 7 and you're not. You're nearly 8. Oh, but I wish I was a Sammy. You ought to see him spit straight in the eye from 20 yards, and every time he hit, he's allowed to play with matches, and he goes to bed dead late. I have to go to bed at 7, even though I'm nearly 8. But you know what, Sammy? You know what he sometimes does? He draws nudie women without arms or legs or even heads in the baths when we go swimming. I'm not allowed to go to the baths. Me mum says I have to wait because I might get drowned because I'm only 7, but I'm not. I'm nearly 8. You know what, Sammy? You know what he sometimes does? He wheezes through the letterbox of the house next door to us. I tried one night, but I had to stand on the crate because I couldn't reach the letterbox. But I will by the time I'm 8. Ooh. Hello. Hi. I've seen you before. Where?
You were playing with some other boys near my house.
Do you live up by the park?
Yes, are you going to come up and play there again?
Well, I might do, but I'm not allowed.
Why?
Because me mum says.
Well, my mummy doesn't allow me to play down here, actually.
Give us a sweet.
All right.
What? Here, there. Can I have another one for us, Sammy?
Oh, yes, take as many as you like.
Are you soft?
I don't think so.
Round here, if you want a sweet, you have to ask about 20 million times. And you know what?
What?
Well, they still don't bleed and give you one.
Oh.
Sometimes a Sammy will give you sweet, but you have to be dead careful if a Sammy gives you sweet.
Why?
Because if a Sammy gives you sweet, he's usually weed on it first.
That sounds like super fun.
It is. If you're a Sammy.
Do you want to play?
I might do. But I'm not playing now because I'm pissed off.
Pissed off. Oh, you say smashing things. Do you know any more words like that?
Yeah, I know loads of words like that. Like, the F word.
Pardon?
The F word.
What does it mean?
I don't know. It sounds good though, doesn't
Oh,
it?
fantastic. When I get home, I'll look it up in the dictionary.
In the what?
The dictionary. You do know what a dictionary is, don't you?
Of course I do. It's a thingy, isn't it?
It's a book that explains the meaning of
The
words.
meaning of words, yeah. Yeah. Oh, Sammy will be here soon. I hope he's in a good mood. He's dead mean sometimes.
Why?
It's because he's got a plate in his head.
A plate? In his head?
Yeah. When we were little and me mum was out, Donna Marie was supposed to be looking after him, but he fell out the window and broke his head on the ground. So they rushed him to a hospital and put a plate in his head.
A plate? A dinner plate?
I don't think so. Because Sammy's head's really not that big.
Oh.
It must have been one of them little plates, like the ones you have bread off.
Oh, a side plate?
No, it's on the top.
And you can see it in his head.
Oh, ooh. I suppose. I suppose if you looked under his hair.
Oh. You know the most smashing things. Will you be my best friend?
Yeah, if you want.
What's your name?
Michael Johnston, but everyone calls me Mickey. What's yours?
Edward Lyons.
Do they call you Eddie?
No.
Well, I will.
Really?
Yeah. How old are you, Eddie?
You're 7 years old.
Oh, well, I'm older than you. I'm nearly 8.
Well, I'm nearly 8, really.
Well, when's your birthday?
July the 18th.
You joke. That's my birthday.
No!
We're born on the same day. That means we can be blood brothers. Do you want to be my blood brother?
Oh, yes, please.
It hurts, you know. Kiss yours.
Ah!
Now this means that we're blood brothers and that we always have to stand by each other. So say as I say. I promise to always protect my brother.
I promise to always protect my brother.
And stand by him.
And stand by him.
And share all my sweets
And
with
share all
him.
my-
Hiya, Sammy.
Kiss is sweet.
I haven't got
So we're going to leave moment 2 there. So we're only really going to be talking about Mickey and Edward. Now this is such a great moment, particularly for comedy. We can see that there's many moments of comedy within this part. And again, remember, one of those intended effects was to make the audience laugh. So let's talk then about the acting skills. Now, I'm not going to go through the physical acting skill words again. You can go back and have a look at the meaning of them. Again, I might say things that I've not necessarily written down, so you should be taking notes as I'm talking. So Mickey shows his childish behaviour and mental maturity through physical mannerism, such as biting his jumper or rolling his jumper over the knees. His posture is in complete contrast to that of Edward. In the very beginning of the moment, Mickey speaks to the audience, showing the style of the piece, which is non-naturalism and breaking the fourth wall. He does this to engage the audience and make them laugh. He makes eye contact with the audience by looking straight out into the auditorium. Edward enters with a stiff, upright posture. His hands tightly wrapped to his side, showing a clear contrast between the two boys. So we have Edward, who's very, very serious. He takes himself quite seriously. He's got his hands wrapped in against his side. Mickey's rolling around the floor. And actually, I think this tells the audience something about their upbringing. I think Edward's probably been a little bit shouted. He's not really used to social interaction with other people. Mickey's very much streetwise. He would be okay out on the street with lots of people around, whereas Edward would probably struggle in that social situation. Again, we see a status difference with Mickey on the floor rolling about in a childish way, and Edward very mature in his approach, standing up. When Mickey introduces himself, Edward stretches his arm out as if to shake Mickey's hand. This is a clear indication of Edward's upbringing and a sort of mirror of his parents. Again, with Edward standing and Mickey on the floor, we see that same proxemics. We see those same status differences as we did with Mrs. Johnson and Mrs. Loynes at the beginning. Just as we were watching that clip a moment ago, I saw something that I hadn't written in the notes, but it was a moment where Edward slaps Mickey on the back gently, and Mickey sort of explodes and jumps and falls over the other side. And there's a pause where Edward looks at Mickey, and I think Mickey probably wanted Edward to go and just play around with him a little bit, but Edward didn't really seem to know what was going on, so it would question how much social interaction he's had with other people and whether he knows to actually play. And the way in which they show that through their acting skills is quite clever, really. So moment 2, vocal skills then. So Mickey speaks with a high pitch and childish tone of voice. Now, voice is very, very important in this part, because as you can see, the boys that are playing Mickey and Edward, the actors, are certainly older than 7 and 8. In fact, I would probably put their age around about 17 or 18. In the professional production of this, it's actual adults playing those boys, and those adults could be anything from 25 to 30. So how do you make yourself seem younger than you actually are? So Mickey speaks with a high pitch and a childish tone of voice. This is to show the audience the age and immaturity of the character. Mickey speaks with a Liverpudlian accent and a fast pace. In the moment where Mickey tells Edward about the F word, Mickey speaks at a slow pace and quietly whispers into Edward's ear what it is. Which follows with both the boys laughing about. Again, using their vocal skills to show the age of the character, not knowing what the F word is and that it's not meant to be said. It's sort of that idea of knowing something as a child that's actually a secret and sort of whispering into each other's ears. Edward speaks with an RP accent and a posh tone of voice. The contrast between the two boys is replicating what the audience had previously seen between Mrs. J and Mrs. Loynes. Edward speaks correctly, pronouncing every word and every sound. If you listen to the boys speak, and actually if you listen to Mrs. Loynes and Mrs. Johnson speak as well, the boys, Edward's very, very good in pronouncing every letter and every sound in words. For example, pitch, whereas Edward might say pitch and actually drop that T sound in the middle of there. Yeah, or yeah, in it, or instead of isn't it. So these things are really important to pick up on. So the last part, and this part is your task. So you now need to go to the live theatre notes that I provided you with, and you are going to complete moment 3 by yourself. We're going to watch it together, and then you can do it. So the final moments of the performance where Mickey and Edward are both adults. The audience see Mickey enter Edward's office, and both of the boys end up dead in the end. Don't go overboard with this, just writing bullet points telling me what they are specifically doing and describing their acting skills. We've spoken about, you've got the adjectives bank, you've got the big sheet, you're struggling how to describe their voice. Have a look at both and see what you can use. So we're going to watch the moment together.
None of us would argue with you on that score. But what we would question is this.
Stay where you are!
Hello, Mickey.
Listen to that voice, very
I stopped
different.
taking the pills.
Oh.
I started thinking again, right? Just get her out of here, mister, now! I had to start thinking again, Eddie, because there was one thing left in my life. Just one thing, Eddie, Linda, and I wanted to keep us so I stopped taking the pills. It was too late, wasn't it? Do you know who told me about you and Linda, Eddie, your mother? She came to the factory
I don't know what
and she told me.
Linda and I are just friends.
Friends? Friends, I could kill you! We were friends, weren't we? Blood brothers, wasn't it? Remember? Yes, then how come you got everything and I got nothing? Hey, Eddie. Friends. I've been thinking again, Eddie. You and Linda were friends, weren't you? When she first got pregnant, does my child belong to you as well as everything else? Does she, Eddie?
No,
does
for
she?
God's sake!
Listen, son. I've got armed marksmen with me, but if you do exactly as I say, we won't need to use them, will we? Now listen, Michael. Put down the gun. Just put the gun down, son.
What am I doing, Ed? I thought I was going to shoot you. I can't even do that. I don't even know if the thing's loaded.
Mickey? Mickey, don't shoot him, son!
What's that woman doing?
Get that woman away.
Bam, you get out of here now!
Mickey's your brother! You're his twin brother, and I couldn't afford to keep both of you, and his mom couldn't have kids, and I'm sorry, I agreed to give one of you away. I'm so sorry, Mickey.
You! Why didn't you give me away, eh? I could have been him. I could have been him.
Nobody move. It's all right. It's all over. Just stay where you are.
And do we blame superstition?
So sorry to cut it off there. So that's the moment that I'd like you to talk about. There's so many things in this moment that that you could write about in your live theatre notes. How the through the actors acting, they create that catharsis that we were talking about at the very beginning within the audience. If, like me, you have goosebumps just watching that moment, it's very, very powerful, even for us watching it on video. So you should be talking about any of the characters that you've seen on stage minus the narrator. I don't want you to talk about him. I've put who you can talk about on your live theatre notes.
None of us would argue.
So at the end of the lesson, hopefully you've managed to finish off those tasks that I asked you to do. Any problems, you can message me and ask me any questions that I will try to help you with. So you had a learning objective, which was to learn how to prepare detailed live theatre notes for an examination. By the end of this lesson, you should have understood how various production elements within Blood Brothers. So we spoke about the production elements at the beginning and what all of the production elements are that make up that show. We've spoken about two production elements. Well, I said we were going to speak about two, which was acting and lighting. We spoke about acting today, and we're going to talk about lighting next time. The second part is to be able to prepare detailed notes about live theatre production. I should be seeing you do that in your moment 3 when you email me your work, and again using drama terminology accurately when describing the live theatre production. Don't forget to email me your work as well.